Robert Harrison had built an empire on precision. Every decision, every contract, every merger, calculated down to the last detail. But on that humid Tuesday morning in September, standing in the hallway of Maplewood Elementary, he realized he'd made a mistake that no spreadsheet could fix. He'd sent his daughter Emma to the wrong school. Robert was 42, tall and composed, with the kind of presence that made boardrooms fall silent. Salt and pepper hair, perfectly tailored navy suits, Italian leather shoes that clicked with authority on marble floors. He'd learned to wear confidence like armor after his wife Sarah passed 3 years ago. Emma had been only 4 then, now 7, with her mother's gentle brown eyes and infectious curiosity. She was everything that mattered. The morning had started. Like any other chaotic morning in their household, Emma couldn't find her favorite purple backpack, Robert burned the toast, and they were running 15 minutes late. He'd programmed the address into his phone the night before, distracted by an overseas call, and didn't double-check it. The registration packet sat unopened on his desk at home. So here they were. Not at Oak Ridge Academy, the prestigious private school where Emma was enrolled, but at Maplewood Elementary, a small public school on the other side of town. "Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging his sleeve, "everyone's looking at us." She wasn't wrong. Children streamed past them, chattering and laughing, while Robert stood frozen in the corridor, his phone pressed to his ear, waiting for his assistant to confirm what he already knew. The cheerful bulletin boards, covered in crayon drawings, seemed to mock his mistake. Somewhere in this building, a first-grade class was starting without the student who was supposed to be there. "Mr. Harrison?" The voice was soft but steady. Robert turned to find a young woman approaching them, perhaps 27 or 28, with warm, honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple cream-colored sundress and canvas shoes, moving with an easy grace that seemed to belong to this bright, noisy world of children. Her smile was genuine, reaching her hazel eyes. "I'm Miss Sophie Bennett. I teach the first-grade class here at Maplewood." She crouched down to Emma's level. "And you must be the beautiful little girl who looked a bit lost in our hallway. What's your name, sweetheart?" Emma glanced up at Robert for permission. He nodded, still processing the embarrassment of his error. "Emma," she said quietly. "Emma Harrison." "What a lovely name," Sophie said, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to ease the tension in Emma's small shoulders. "I was just about to start morning circle time. Would you like to join us while your dad figures things out? We're reading a story about a brave little mouse today." Robert opened his mouth to explain, to apologize, to extract them from this situation as quickly as possible. But Emma's eyes had lit up at the mention of the story, and Sophie was already standing, extending her hand to his daughter with such natural kindness that refusing seemed somehow cruel. "It's really no trouble," Sophie said, meeting Robert's gaze. There was no judgment there, only understanding. "These things happen more often than you'd think. First day of school is overwhelming for everyone. I sent her to the wrong school," Robert admitted, the words feeling foreign. He wasn't used to acknowledging mistakes, especially not to strangers. "I need to drive her across town to Oak Ridge Academy." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "That's a good 45 minutes each way in morning traffic, and if I'm not mistaken, they start at 8:15, same as us." She glanced at her watch. "It's already 8:20 now." The reality settled over Robert like a weight. He'd already disrupted Emma's first day. Arriving more than 2 hours late would only make it worse. She'd walk into a classroom of children who'd already formed their first bonds, already knew where the crayons were kept, already had someone to sit with at lunch. "Here's a thought," Sophie said gently. "Why don't you let Emma stay with us today? She can experience what school is like here, and you can sort out the enrollment situation for tomorrow. Sometimes the universe gives us little detours for a reason." Robert wanted to argue. Wanted to insist that Oak Ridge, with its renowned curriculum and impressive facilities, was where Emma belonged. But his daughter was already slipping her small hand into Sophie's, looking up at this young teacher with something he hadn't seen in his child's eyes for a long time, trust in a stranger's kindness. "Would that be okay, Daddy?" Emma asked. "Can I stay with Miss Sophie?" And what could he say? That his pride mattered more than his daughter's comfort? That a mistake couldn't become something else, something unexpected and perhaps even better? "If Miss Bennet doesn't mind," he said slowly. "Not at all," Sophie assured him. "Come to my classroom at 3 o'clock. You can see what Emma's been up to." She smiled at his daughter. "Ready to meet some new friends?" Emma nodded, suddenly shy but willing. As Sophie led her down the hallway, she glanced back once, and Robert raised his hand in a small wave. Then they disappeared around the corner, and he was left standing alone, feeling like he'd just stepped off the edge of something certain into something completely unknown. The office called 3 times before noon. A crisis with the Singapore account. A contract that needed his signature. A conference call he was supposed to lead. Robert handled them all from his car in Maplewood's parking lot, unable to make himself drive away. Through the classroom window, he could see Sophie moving among the children, crouching beside desks, listening intently to their excited voices, her face animated as she explained something with her hands. And there was Emma, sitting at a small table with 3 other children, laughing at something a red-haired boy was saying. Laughing. His serious, cautious Emma, who asked permission before touching anything, who colored within the lines and never raised her voice, she was laughing with abandon. At 3 o'clock sharp, Robert knocked on the classroom door. The walls were covered with children's artwork, the kind of chaotic, joyful creativity that Sarah would have loved. She'd been an artist, seeing beauty in things he'd always rushed past. "Daddy!" Emma ran to him, her purple backpack bouncing. "Miss Sophie taught us about butterflies, and we made caterpillars out of egg cartons, and Tommy shared his cookies at snack time, and, oh, can I come back tomorrow, please?" Robert looked over her head at Sophie, who was organizing papers at her desk. She met his eyes with that same gentle understanding. "Could we talk for a moment?" she asked quietly. "Emma, honey, why don't you show your dad your butterfly drawing?" As Emma pulled him toward the art corner, chattering about metamorphosis and cocoons with vocabulary that surprised him, Sophie finished with her papers and came to stand beside them. "She's a wonderful child," Sophie said simply. "Bright, thoughtful, and kind to the other children. She fit right in." "She seemed happy," Robert admitted. "I haven't seen her like that in a while." Sophie nodded, understanding passing between them. "Mr. Harrison, can I be honest with you?" He braced himself for judgment, for criticism of his parenting or his chaotic morning. "Your daughter doesn't need the most prestigious school," Sophie said gently. "She needs a place where she feels safe enough to be herself, where she can laugh and make mistakes and know that someone is watching out for her. I can't promise you cutting-edge technology or famous alumni, but I can promise you that." Robert looked at his daughter, who was explaining her drawing with the kind of detail and enthusiasm he usually reserved for business plans. In one day, this place, this teacher, had given Emma something he'd been trying to buy with tuition checks and prestige. "I made a mistake this morning," he said slowly, "but I'm starting to think it might have been the right one." Sophie smiled. "Sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we need to be." Emma returned to Maplewood every day that fall. Robert adjusted his schedule, arriving 15 minutes early each morning to help Sophie set up the classroom. He learned the names of all Emma's classmates, attended every parent meeting, and even volunteered for the winter carnival. And Sophie, patient, kind Sophie with her gentle wisdom and her ability to see what children needed before they knew themselves, became the person he called when Emma had nightmares, when school projects overwhelmed him, when he needed to remember that perfection wasn't the goal. On a crisp November evening after the parent-teacher conferences had ended and the school had emptied, Robert found himself still sitting in Sophie's classroom, helping her grade spelling tests. "Can I ask you something?" he said, setting down his red pen. Why were you so kind to us that first day? I was clearly out of my depth, clearly didn't belong here. Sophie looked up from her work, considering the question. My mom was a single parent, she said after a moment. After my dad left, she worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I remember the days she forgot to pack my lunch, or signed me up for the wrong soccer team, or showed up to school events in her waitress uniform because she couldn't go home to change. And I remember the teachers who made her feel like those mistakes mattered more than her love. She smiled, a little sadly. I decided I'd never be that kind of teacher. We all deserve grace for our missteps, especially when we're doing our best. Robert felt something shift in his chest, some locked door opening. You gave me more than grace that day. You gave me perspective. And you gave Emma a chance to be a regular kid instead of a CEO's daughter, Sophie countered. We all needed that mistake, I think. Outside the window, the autumn sun was setting, painting the classroom in warm gold. In that moment, Robert understood what Sarah had tried to tell him in those last difficult months. That building an empire meant nothing if you missed the small, precious moments that made life worth living. He'd sent his daughter to the wrong school and found his way home,